Do you have 9 o'clock? Really?
You gotta wonder what kind of angle it has to be.
Well, one of our satellites are off. Well, we'll go. You got it? Okay. Morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. This is a workshop on communication strategy. I'll ask the clerk to call a roll, please.
This is a public workshop of the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners this 12th day of April 2022. In attendance are Chairman Ronald D. Kitchen Jr., First Vice Chair Ruthie Schlebach, Second Vice Chair Holly Davis, Commissioner Scott Carnahan, and Jeff Kennard, County Administrator Randy Oliver.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oliver.
Yes, this is a workshop the board requested on communication strategy. Veronica is going to provide some information. Commissioner Davis has some thoughts and has some input as it relates to the presentation, and what we're going to be looking for is where the board wants to go from here and how they want to address it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Veronica.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Morning.
I just put this together to give you
Is
guys.
your microphone on?
There's a green light. There we go. Is that better? I just wanted to give you guys an overview of what the Office of Communications has been doing. As you know, when Cynthia took the position, when she retired from Public Information Officer, your board approved to turn the position into an office with some staff. So now, in addition to having a Public Information Officer, we also have a Communications Specialist, which is Miles Saunders, and an Audiovisual Technician, Charles, who makes sure that these meetings go according to plan. So communication strategy is made up of 3 parts: branding, public relations, and marketing. With government communications, I would venture to say that most of what we do falls under public relations, but there are elements of the other 2 as well. Some of the things the Communications Office talks about and works on is public information, community outreach, press releases. We are responsible for web management. We manage the CMS for the Citrus BOCC website, make sure that the content contributors are trained. We have audiovisual support, meeting facilitation, Teams meeting, integration, things like that. Content creation, and then ADA compliance as it relates to content and how citizens may interact in a non-traditional way with content through use of screen readers and other things like that. Our 21-22 budget was the very first budget that was independently broken out for 2106, which is communications. Prior to that, it was part of the administration budget. So this is the first full fiscal year budget that was created. That being said, it is probably not a perfect reflection of what the office actually needs for a budget, but this is a test budget. We wanted to see where we might have too much budgeted, where we may have a little bit of a shortfall, and adjust that for this upcoming budget cycle. And then that third budget cycle should be where we can really lock in an appropriate dollar amount and try to keep things pretty flat moving forward from there. And you'll see we have 2 larger line items. A few of these have been combined, but the 2 largest line items by far, other than personnel cost, is a line item for branding and marketing strategy, and a line item for audiovisual equipment. We got a lot of CARES money. Kevin Mims did a wonderful job of spending that CARES money, but he had to spend it quickly on a lot of these meetings integrations that we have here. So there's cables that are missing. There are parts that we may need to get to enhance that system and then go from there. So that's what that money is for, and moving forward to do projects like Teams integration in the Purple Room up in administration, things like that. So we have, again, like I said, branding, marketing, and public relations. I won't bore you guys with the definitions, but those 3 segments are what I wanted to focus on with branding and marketing strategy. So the first year, putting $20,000 in, my goal, my vision for this fiscal year was to go ahead and focus on that left column, the creative services, one-time creative services. So these would be things like a brand identity, a brand audit, creating a strategy for a brand, content creation, image campaigns, and then logo design. Marketing services and public engagement services are things that are available through agencies of record, even in the government sphere, but those are the secondary and third items that I would spend that money on. My plan is incrementally to move kind of from left to right on this presentation. Obviously, if there was more money or, we got involved in a marketing campaign that was a cooperative thing through maybe like NACO or FAC, that would be somewhere where we could maybe put more money into the public engagement side of things. So you guys are all very familiar with branding. I'm not going to give you the 101 course on it, but as you know, my previous experience through the Visitors Bureau, we had an agency of record. It was very successful. Wonderful branding that we had there, as well as secondary branding and great marketing efforts. Obviously, government's a little bit different than that when you're selling a product versus selling a service. It is going to be a little bit different, but the main difference is just the public branding is the relationship within the community, and the place branding pulls a little bit more on physical and emotional elements. So what's the purpose of branding? Why does it matter if we have a recognizable brand? It enhances communication, improves perception, adds value, and it builds relationships. So a recognizable brand can go a long way towards enhancing communication before any two-way communication is actually taking place. The primary audiences for the Citrus County brand is Citrus County residents currently, prospective Citrus County residents who may be looking to move here, business and professional groups maybe looking to relocate, and Florida residents in general. Branding sometimes can be misunderstood, but basically what branding strategy is you begin the process and then your stakeholders project their image onto your brand. So you set the stage.
You skipped slides a couple. But there you go.
These two, oh yeah, I just went through them real quickly, but so branding is who you are, the organization's personality, how you stand apart, and your promise to stakeholders, which ties right into what we just completed last week with the strategic plan. So branding is not just the logo, tagline, or collateral. It's not a product that can be created or packaged. It's not controlled fully by the organization or stakeholders, but again, we have an element of both of that. You create the brand, you create the message, you make sure to uphold that, and then the stakeholders reflect their perception onto it, and that's what ends up making a pretty good brand. So we're in a good spot right now. We have good branding, just not a lot of it. We have the Citrus County seal logo, which is actually pretty effective, and people, ad agencies that I've spoken with about this, we could be in a worse spot to start with this. The logo is something that I envision continuing to use on official documents, but I think that there would be a way to make a simpler, cleaner, more modern version of this that could be used in a little bit more of a flexible way, and I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. When we're considering branding for Citrus County, we also want to consider the other brands that are out there. We do have a lot of sub-brands in the community services department. A lot of those divisions have their own branding, which either works in concert with or separately from the logo. But you can see there that a lot of those have the same elements, same color scheme. Some have incorporated the logo. So there's already a general feeling of what those brand guidelines are. They just haven't been defined as such for the county level. You also want to consider the City of Crystal River, City of Inverness, and other surrounding counties and entities. Complementary, you don't want those brands to be conflicting with each other. You also don't want brand confusion to happen. That's already a tough enough point for the citizens between municipalities, counties, different organizations. You want to make sure you stand apart.
You said you don't want brand what to happen?
Confusion.
Confusion, okay.
Yes. You don't want people to start emailing you thinking we're Manatee County, right? So that's very important to think about those kinds of things as well. And that's why a brand audit is important in brand strategy, because if an agency is going to come in and evaluate what you have currently, then they'll see where the next step that you need to take it while considering all these other factors. So this is something I could attempt to do, but I would not consider rebranding or a brand refresh to be something that's in the purview of our current staff. Not only for a skill set, but also a third-party endorsement, taking a look at that in a third-party way, I think is very important. It's hard for us to see the forest for the trees when we're trying to brand ourselves, so a third party can be very helpful in that regard. So what we do have is a logo. What we don't have is really branding or style guidelines. We don't have a logo usage guideline or color palette, font usage. There's no standardized email signature. We do have business card guidelines, but they are a little bit government. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, I think there are definitely people whose business cards should reflect that level of respect and organizational order, but I do think that having some business card guidelines using the additional colors, we could kind of make the more public-facing and interactive business cards a little more fun. Website and social media content, we have guidelines in our head, but not, again, written down. Key messaging and tone of voice are two important things, too, that I think we can use the strategic plan that we just worked on to determine what those important things would be. So if we were to do a rebranding or a brand refresh, that would be something I would provide to an agency, would be that strategic plan, so that they can try to evaluate what they think key messaging for Citrus County would be. Where can we improve our communications with citizens? Where are we already doing a good job? And what can we do to enhance both of those? So this is my brand guidelines that I made for you guys. Clearly not incredibly professional, just a PDF presentation. But I do have some examples for you so you can kind of see what I'm talking about and hopefully visualize it a little bit better. The city of Marietta has a really great logo update, and I really enjoy the way that they did this process, so I stole these slides from a presentation that I went to on government communications. Marietta, you can see they have that sun, they've got the hills, they've got the green, yellow, and blue, and that was probably a very modern looking logo back in the 90s when they created that. It has some really traditional 90s elements. But what they did is they adapted the brand. So they didn't completely trash the Marietta logo idea. They kept the sun, they kept some of the color, and they kept some of the shape, but they were able to then create the smaller logo there at the bottom with just the M. You see Discover Crystal River doing that same thing sometimes with the circle and the manatee. You don't necessarily need the words if you have that recognizable circle. So I did like that they were able to adapt that brand and make it usable for a lot of different purposes, not just one specific document. They have a 30-year anniversary there. They've got Connected by Business is the center one, if you can't see that on the screen, for economic development. And then Connected by Wellbeing is the other one, tells them where they are. So I like the idea of staying close to your roots while still giving it an update. And that's when we talk about a rebrand, it would be, completely from scratch, starting brand new. Adapting the brand or a brand refresh might be all we need in this case, but that would be something that we want to talk to a professional branding agency about, in my opinion. Won't go through these slides all with you, but you do have them in your packet. Just an example of what professional brand guidelines can look like. These are the original brand guidelines for Discover Crystal River, so they have been updated a little bit. You notice in this slide we don't have the word Discover there. That was added on later on. Then we also ended up adding the cities underneath. We have a few other logos for tourism advocates, Discover Crystal River Fishing with the round manatee device. But this does still end up being incredibly useful for the team over there. They've got correct color use, incorrect use of the logo. These things seem intuitive, and they are to a degree, but it does still help to have a plug-and-play manual that you can hand to anyone creating content and say, these are your guidelines. Go crazy, have fun. Some colors, fonts, key messaging. And Citrus Libraries actually has extremely good brand guidelines too. I believe these were produced in-house, so they're not quite as polished in their presentation, but they do work really effectively for Citrus Libraries, and they've been using the same branding for about, I would say, close to a decade now. So it could probably use a small refresh, but it's been extremely effective and worked really well for their system. They've got their colors, logos, different variations on that logo, business card design, again, proper usage, fonts, and so basically that is my main project that I'm looking to do for communications in this current fiscal year and moving forward is just put an incremental amount of money into branding strategy and then continue to finance that until that project is completed. Then move on to marketing, which I think is more of a one-shot kind of deal, project-based, and less of an agency of record at this time. Based on the budget that we have. But in the future, having additional money, it may be worthwhile to look at putting an agency of record involved with communications. But I am of the belief that in terms of me getting started, I would like to start slow and steady. But again, additional resources would just allow us to do more faster. And then Randy, if you wanted to just speak to this statute real quickly. This is the Educate versus Advocate statute that we've talked to you guys about before. There has been some changes to the language for that statute, so Randy will go over those changes.
Yeah, the state changed the statute in the last legislative session, and the governor signed it fairly quickly. The genesis, as I understand it, of this case was a state delegation member that got a card for the child because of a school board referendum. Previously, it permitted us to do like a mass mailing and say, okay, if there was a campaign for the passage of something, you could say these projects would be done. You could give them a specific list so people could identify with it. This legislation, in my opinion, totally precludes that, and as a result of that, the only thing you can report on are what's called official actions. So, for example, if the board wanted to go for a sales tax for roads, within the meeting, the board could identify the roads they were going to do, and then you could report that as the official action. Okay, but you couldn't mass mail that out to everyone under the way the current legislation is. It would have to be done through political action committee, which the county obviously is not involved with.
Randy, may I? Can you list that information on our website?
You can, as long as you list it as an official action.
Okay.
In other words, the board took action on this date to ask the voters to approve this, and this was what was included in that official action. That would be my opinion.
So if we were to, say, for example, routinely have billboards around the county that simply directs people to our county website for various fun information, things that might grab their attention, and there happens to be a banner on the homepage that says, see sales tax information here. Is that a way
I
to
think
work
we're
it?
stretching it on a banner.
Okay.
If
Or
you
a
put a
link or
banner
whatever.
on that says, view the official actions taken by the board, I think you're well within the parameters.
Okay. Just curious.
So I did include the language for that statute in here for you. If you look at the statute as it is online right now, you'll see the current language. That last two sentences is the sentences that have changed the most in this statute. Irrespective of whether the communication is limited to factual information or advocates for the passage or defeat. So basically, even if it's factual, probably not in the best interest for government staff to spend staff hours or staff dollars on anything other than official actions. So that's a change from when I first created this presentation to now. And that will be taking effect July 1, Randy?
Yes.
Okay.
I
So
do-
that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions for me?
I have
or-
one other point of clarification.
Yeah.
Is this specifically regarding quote-unquote trying to avoid marketing additional taxes to citizens? We can take out advertising to inform citizens of current services and whatnot, correct?
Current services, yes. Any issue, referendum, or amendment, including any state question that's subject to a vote of the electors, that's what we
Okay.
cannot discuss.
Awesome.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for me or?
Questions? Yes.
Good job. I was just curious, as a professional, what you would clean up in the seal that is now?
I would like something that's a little cleaner, so just less detail. I would like to maybe pop out something that's a little bit more recognizable out of that seal. So the existing seal, the way that it is currently, it wouldn't stand alone, but the first thing that I personally would do is just pull out the citrus with the oranges on the C and the ribbon, and just pull that out and see how it stands alone, and then maybe tweak on that. But again, if I thought that I could do this successfully, then I would just go ahead and do that and not budget for it. But I do think that giving the county a professional, polished image, it's important to get someone who does nothing but logo design, nothing but branding, to take that on, because I am not qualified, I don't believe, to do that for an organization of our size and
I was just curious, thank you.
yeah. I would start there and take out all the background information, keep it clean, recognizable, simple, and I think that they could possibly do that, but we would have to see.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I will say that I, being in this business, I cringe at the word marketing because it's really just communications, and a lot of times we refer to what we do for a living as MarCom, marketing communications. This is much more citizen communications, and to my mind, it will, make everything that we do so much more effective if we explain it right the first time.
Correct.
And you reduce angry calls, angry emails, you reduce staff time all the way through. And it's a big trust builder with citizens, and I think it'll leverage itself over time. You know,
I agree
It won't have a
completely.
huge impact first year, but as we keep going at it over and over and over again and being very forthright, and like I said, explaining things correctly the first time, very clearly. There's also something that I was just reading, and the whole TikTok phenomena, and I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but supposedly humans have now a 6-second attention span, and goldfish beat us with 7, but goldfish don't watch TikTok. So that whole too long didn't read is a big TLDR, is a big buzzword in the marketing community. And so when we send long emails to explain things about what we're doing in the community, that just, people don't read. They like infographics, they like more graphic novel type approaches to getting a point across. So I think we
Yes.
can do a lot here, and I'm with you, baby steps. We don't need to go, as we say in the South, pig wild and hog crazy, or is it hog wild and pig crazy? I'm not sure. But we don't need to go crazy, but I think baby steps, the branding aspect, and then I would see, to be fiscally prudent, I would see us growing the internal team slowly over time and simply using an outside forest for the trees third party to do some big stuff and then hand it over.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then periodically hand over some big stuff and let the internal team run with it.
As I mentioned earlier, I don't think we're at the point now where an agency of record would be the right way to go, the way that
And we may never
BCB.
be, is
Correct.
kind of my point. We may never be, because as long as you have that outside reference at key points, then I think that that's totally sufficient, so.
I think that there is a lot that can be done in-house, and I certainly am an advocate of making sure that Citrus County staff are the ones who are benefiting from the opportunity to be creative and get our message out there. But there are certain times that a third party is the more beneficial group to go with in terms of design, especially campaigns. Again, when it's internal and you're trying to explain, something that is being done, maybe not necessarily that's going to be voted on by the voters, but just something that is being done within the system. That can sometimes seem clear. The greatest miscommunication is the idea that it ever took place, kind of thing. So you think your message is wonderful, you send it out to the citizens, and they get it, and they say, what is this, So that can be very helpful when creating kind of sticky marketing campaigns to, advertise a change in services, an update in services, a loss of services, especially when it's something that is not necessarily the best news. Obviously, I wish I could only share good news on the county, but occasionally there are closures or changes that affect citizens in a negative way. And getting that information out there in a positive way that resonates with people, that encourages word of mouth between citizens who might not see the original documentation. All of those things are really important projects that could be outsourced if need be. But I definitely think that it is pointless to put any money or time into marketing or PR as it relates to outside agencies before we get that first column of creative services taken care of.
And one last point I would say to my colleagues, I would encourage you to think of branding overall. I know it seems like much ado about nothing to say, don't use, have high contrast with logo on background and stuff like that. But after seeing what various people have done to various brands over the years when they don't have a brand guide, it's kind of scary. So if you think of it metaphorically as weather stripping your house and keeping all your doors and windows closed, it's weather stripping for the mind. If you look at something and it resonates from piece to piece to piece, and it looks like the same person, the same personality as it were, from piece to piece to piece, it allows, there's a whole science to this that allows the brain to glom onto that message that much faster. Whereas if you let those brand standards slide, people are like, is that the county? Is that, and then not quite sure what they're looking at. And there really is a big science to it, so.
Anyone else have anything? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and chime in. First of all, I'll say, Commissioner Davis, thanks for bringing this to our attention. Thanks for bringing this conversation about. And Veronica, absolutely phenomenal job.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here just listening to the presentation. I had look through watching the slides go, I'm reading it, and I'm like, this whole thing makes sense. I'm very happy to hear you say that we don't need an agency of record right now, and then Commissioner Davis said, maybe never. Does it need some polishing? Does it need to be addressed? This is one of those things that really could remain under the radar forever. When we're talking about road resurfacing, buying new tractors for public works, repairing our infrastructure, things like that. The messaging that goes out there, if you ask any of the five of us up here and say, would you like to have, a tractor assembly company move to Citrus County? Would you like to have a telehealth, telemedicine company relocate to Citrus County? Any of those things, we'd say, yeah, that'd be great industry to come here. Well, you don't just make cold calls and those things happen. You've got to have all of these pieces in place, and then those pieces start to fall in place. So while this is something, like I said, that could certainly remain outside of, what we typically see in our job, I can see, and you presented a great reason why it needs to be addressed. And I like the idea of slowly building in-house so that we are handling this in-house. And, I love the honesty when you said, we would like to address this, we would like to address this. I would like to see our in-house staff have the opportunity to be creative and do things in-house rather than going outside. And then in another sentence you said, I think that's beyond the purview of our existing staff. So recognizing our shortcomings, but also saying, let's don't look outside for everything, because we've got a very capable staff that can handle a lot of this. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I did want to say, I was so glad when I asked you what you would clean up, and I had the same thoughts, just the citrus. We're lucky because citrus is in our name. A lot of counties don't have that, for instance, Sarasota. Very early on, I know that the previous board did a fun kind of thing and swapped logos with Manatee County. Even though we are known for the manatees, Crystal Rivers and Discover Crystal River and the TDC are doing a good job incorporating that, but we have the joy of having citrus. And how many times have any of us gone anywhere, I know in 27 years, and they say, where are you from? And I'll say Citrus County, and they'll say, where is that? So if we could do something to just citrus, I think that's brilliant. So thank you.
Thank you. Chair, I think you could probably speak to this as well. The manatee hook is extremely important for the Discover Crystal River brand. I know that the other cities and such have wanted their own ancillary brands, and we have worked on that in the BCB to get a few other locations with their updated single city brand. But that manatee is the low-hanging fruit for visitors. And if visitation is the person who is looking at our branding's goal, then you would hope that our Google efforts and social media efforts and messaging overall is meeting them as visitors with the Discover Crystal River branding. If we're trying to reach citizens with public-facing issues or stormwater rates or anything like that, that would be something that we'd want this branding to fall under. And it doesn't necessarily have to hook people for visitation in the same way that it hooks them for the feelings that you would want to have there are accountability, trust, honesty, openness, availability for dialogue, those kinds of things. So clarity, brevity, those are really important.
Amen to all that. May I?
Yes.
That was very well said, thank you, Commissioner Kennard. I also want to bring up the strategic planning sessions from last week were absolutely brilliant. I have to say, I fell in love with my county all over again on Tuesday and Wednesday, having all those minds in the room, charting what we believe to be a great course for the future that protects the environment and protects our community spirit and small town spirit. So we went through this exercise, and to tie this back to communications, it'll be that much more critical to have really good communications to inform residents as we go through this plan, and also to get feedback from them. But I want to share one little thing that came up We did a SWOT analysis the first day, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. We did a vision statement. We did a mission statement, et cetera. And a vision statement is supposed to be one very short sentence, and the mission statement is longer, right? So they came up with some vision statements that were a little bit too long, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm not taking part in this, so I'm just watching. And in writing so many taglines over the years, a tagline is very similar to a vision statement. So a vision statement is what you see the future to be, and so there's typically a few more words in there. A tagline is something like, one of my favorites, GE, I think retired it, but GE, we bring good things to life, because they are in airplane engines and massive power plant engines, or power plant stuffs, and they're in light bulbs and plugs in our house and all this. So they have this vast swath of products, and how do you wrap all that together? We bring good things to life, because they're essentially an electricity-based company. So to create a tagline, it's like, we bring good things to life. That's 6 words. Typically you want 6 words or less in a tagline, because you want to be going 70 miles an hour down the interstate, see that line on a billboard, and be able to read it at speed, right? Same sort of rule for billboards as there is for taglines. So in that vision statement, I circled the 3 words that kept popping up in all the various teams' vision statements, and it was nature, community, and thrive. And so I wrote a tagline for the county that may or may not go forward, but I said, where nature and community thrive. And the key to that is that every single word, when you go down to 6 words or less, every single word has to have multiple meanings and carry a whole lot of freight, right? And it doesn't say everything that we do, but when you read it, you feel it. And it really, you understand what the brand stands for, right? So where nature and community thrive. That's all the giving back. That's launching a YMCA with no debt. That's small town done right in Inverness. It's us caring about our neighbors. It's all of those things, but it also puts the environment first, because we are the nature coast. And one last point, one of the great ideas that came out at the open to the public sessions on Monday was somebody said that they really want all of our mainstream corridors that come into the county to have a big splashy sign about entering Citrus, not our little green one. And so, for example, it could be a much larger, colorful sign and say, welcome to Citrus County, gateway to the nature coast, where nature and community thrive. And that gives a sense of pride and a sense of place that you're coming home. And I kid you not, over time, that will even reduce littering, I think, because it becomes a point of pride that we live here. And this is our community, and we love it, and we fight to protect it amid all this insane growth that we have going on. So I had a lot of fun the last 2 weeks, I have to say. It's joyful. And I'm done. Thank you.
Anyone else? I got a couple comments. First of all, no surprise that Veronica is the joy that she is in dealing with this stuff. I had the pleasure of working with her for years at the TDC, and a lot of what the good things that happened over there was, Veronica was there and made a big difference once you came there. So I remember what it was like before you came there and after you came there. Also, just a couple of comments on my perspective of this is that, already I think we're talking about 2 different things. I hear some commissioners talking about branding, and I hear other commissioners talking about marketing citrus. Well, if you go out and talk to the public, they're not too crazy about marketing citrus. They say people are finding us just fine. So what I thought this was all about was in creating better communications with our constituents, with the public. We had talked about we might do things, but if they don't know about them. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the local newspaper, as everybody knows, and I think they do a horrible job of getting our message out about what we do. So, yeah, if we can do a better job of it, wonderful. But a couple of things. And my own comments are, and, take it for what it's worth, but I think the first thing when Veronica talked about cleaning up we have, we create a website And then you go on that website and you look and you see that, as an example, what comes up about the commissioners is so out of date. I mean, and then we put things on there like voting records, but then the voting records aren't kept up. So it gives the impression that we created something and walked away and forgot about it. So if we're going to do this, if we're going to spend 10 cents creating something, it's going to have to be maintained. You know, it's going to have to be kept current and up to date. So I think, you know, when we look at this, you know, we have to start with, you know, what the strategy is. The other thing I found at the TDC struggled because politicians were always involved in it. And when the politicians got out of it, the TDC thrived. And Veronica won't say that, but she was there. She saw what happened. People said, how come you don't market citrus? How come you don't market citrus? And people would say, what county is Las Vegas in? What county is, you know, this in? What county? Because when you ask people, where do you live? And you say Citrus County, and they say, never heard of it. And I said, you ever hear of Crystal River? You ever hear of the man? Oh, yeah, you know, so there you go. And as you said, that's the low-hanging fruit. So if you're trying to get people here, you market that. If you're talking to people that already live here, we don't need to tell them where Citrus County is, you know. So I think the first thing we have to do is kind of be focused on, if you're saying, you know, first we do 1, then 2, then 3, what is 1? You know, and then we do that well. And as we do that, we maintain, you know, what we're moving forward with. So again, you know, it's just a matter of whatever we do it well, you know, there's a big difference between people. I know a lot of people watch at home. A lot of people, you know, I get comments about that all the time, and they love watching it live. But then they also like the clerk's website where they can go back and just cut through all the stuff they don't want to watch and go directly to the things that are important. So, you know, the technology out there allows us to do these things. So my thought with these always is, you know, engage good people, get out of their way, and let them do their work. And so, and then the board can decide how much you want to spend on doing that. So, again, I think it was a very wise move to bring you in. It was a very wise move to reorganize the department. But I just hate to see us throw a whole lot of money into something until we have demonstrated, you know, first we've accomplished that, and then we move into this and so on. So again, great presentation. Thanks for you know, what you're doing, and again, you know, I think in some ways you kind of cut yourself short when you say you don't have the expertise to do this. And some things I think you do. I'm resistant when I hear adding more staff. I always am, because the more staff you hire, you know, what I hear in the community, we say hire more staff to do this. What I hear in the community is increasing the size of government. Okay, and so they'd say, I would rather have my roads done than have more people in the marketing department. And commissioners may say, well, you know, both are important, but, you know, we work for the citizens, so you have to listen to what they say. So they can go hand in hand if we're doing things for the citizens and we do a better job of communicating with them. But they have to want it. They have to want the information. If we can have the best communication there, but if people don't go to it, you know. And when it comes to billboards, I know the TDC shot that down many, many times because it wasn't an efficient use of advertising dollars. Now, I don't know if people in Citrus County need to be told they live in Citrus County, but then we come back to, are we marketing people to come here, or are we communicating with our citizens? So as long as we can keep our mission, you know, straight as what we're trying to do, you know, I think this is all good stuff.
May I respond?
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you very much. I appreciate your comments, and I do agree with a lot of what you're saying. I appreciate that you have confidence in my abilities, but I do not believe that you would get your money's worth from me paying me what I would pay a branding expert to rebrand. But I do think that setting the team up for success with some guidelines, we would easily be able to take that and run with it for the duration until more development would be needed for that office. Marketing, things like that, the marketing campaigns here in the third column would really be something that we could look at for the type of marketing that we're talking about to citizens. Saw something really eye-catching the other day. The Department of Health obviously has a few billboards within Citrus County, and they have a dental oral health billboard, and it's just blue background and some photoshopped lips and text, and then the FDOH logo right down there in the bottom. So when you drive by it, you see a big mouth and you see FDOH. But what they're advertising is not, hey, did you know you have a local health department? It is, did you know that you can get these dental services through your health department? So that would be the kind of marketing that we would do to our citizens. Let me get here and see. So obviously, our Citrus County residents, we would love to let them know about our services, any changes in government processes or upcoming opportunities for public input, anything like that. Prospective Citrus County residents, you want them to know where we are, obviously, but they already know because they are prospective citizens to be moving here. So you just want to kind of give them a better idea of what our community is about and less about what, again, back to that place in public branding, it's the organization's relationship within the community. When people look at it, I would love for people to feel good when they see a Citrus County logo. This is official information. This is an organization that cares about me. These are the people who are working hard to make sure that my roads are paved and that my utilities are connected and things like that. Whereas the physical and emotional elements are more for the place branding. So I would agree that the market for this is not the tourist. It's these groups specifically who you would think would already have a general geographic idea of where we're located, but as you can imagine, it's very important for economic development to see a place have a real purpose and a real identity, especially as working from home becomes an option. If you want to headquarter somewhere and give people a reason to move to the location where you're headquartering, a positive quality of life, which is very much the focus of the stakeholders' strategic mission, good quality of life. If that is what you convey through a quick branding statement, then that's wonderful.
And one final comment, and again, I know you're looking at the interface of everything, but you just said something that I think from a policy perspective we have to be very careful of, and that is the only reason the community got behind the TDC is they realized they weren't paying for it. And the only reason the county community got behind economic development is they weren't paying for it. Okay, when it's pointed out that it comes out of the business tax, and it's, oh, okay. But the first time they find out we're using general fund dollars to advocate for economic development or for tourism, that's going to, then we're mixing and commingling. So I don't think there's a problem with keeping consistent branding and all that. We just have to be careful about how we allocate those dollars so that we can always stand back and say, hey, we're not using general fund money for this or for that or whatever. So that's my only point. Yes.
100% agree. The upper left-hand corner is where this money would be. So there's two different aspects we're looking at. We're looking at having a hyper-professional look to the county and throughout all of our communication. So if people seek us out, that's Florida residents, that's prospective residents. If they seek us out, they get full information on our website, they get an idea of what we're all about. That's stuff that we need for our residents already. So that's already paid for, right? We aren't actually running billboards out in the state or up north to try to get people to move here or visit here. One is TDC for tourism. For new residents, we don't need to market. They're coming. That's absolutely do not need to do that. And you're absolutely right in terms of economic development, any outreach dollars have to come from those funds, not general fund, right? We have to be very clear about that. So the two top ones, the economic development and citrus residents, are the two most critical ones to have in there. But the one on the, like I said, the economic development is only, we look very professional when they come and look at us, if that makes any sense. Does that help? Okay.
I just want to mention the reason that I mentioned economic development specifically is because they actually use our seal as part of their logo currently. So I would anticipate that would be something moving forward. When David was in his position, we worked a lot together to make sure our colors were in line with each other. The design of ad buys that he was making were in line. So while I would not use economic development money for a communications marketing campaign, it could still be advantageous to economic development. And then them using our updated, refreshed branding could be beneficial to us.
As long as you keep in mind, everything you just said, you're going to have to explain to the citizens, right?
course,
So that's
absolutely.
the whole point of what we're talking
Certainly.
about, right? So we get it, we understand, but, I just spent yesterday afternoon trying to explain to a whole group of people why we do what we do, So it's been great to have you there to do that, so.
Next time, just give me a call.
I will. Does anybody else have any other comments, questions, anything?
I just wanted to do a recap as to where we are during the preliminary budget. What the board decided, at least for the time being, was to include those additional requests that were made by the board as part of the budgetary process, and you all will deal with that, when you get to the final budget adoption.
Well, let's clarify with those additional requests. Let's identify those and be direct. Because here's my concern. I think as the budget is moving forward as we see it today, it's not going to pass. And I would hate to see Veronica and her efforts get shot out of the water if the whole thing rides on something that's not there now. So that's what I think we need to be very, very clear about. So we need to,
Well, the consensus was there were some commissioner-related items that were suggested, and at the point that we did the preliminary budget presentation, the direction that I heard from the board anyway was that those items temporarily be included and they would potentially be dealt with at a later date. What we're, once we get the constitutionals in, we're proposing to do something a little bit different this year. When we get their requests in, I would like to do a workshop with the board on budget so we know what we're looking at in what I call total magnitude of money. And then you can prioritize the needs of the community.
I guess my question that I'm asking is, as we sit here now, is there any new funding being requested in the upcoming budget that relinks to the success of what Veronica is proposing?
The answer to that is that Commissioner Davis made some suggestions on funding for certain things. Okay, the direction that I heard from the board was for the time being to include that in the budget, and it would be dealt with at a later point as to whether you want to go forward or not.
Okay, and I understand all that, but I'm not getting an answer to my question. And my question is, hypothetically, let's say those items don't make it through the budget process. Are we spinning our wheels and talking about what we're talking about today? Or, there you go, that's what I'm looking for. So if that doesn't happen, we can still move forward with what has been presented today. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we will give you a couple options. In other words, we'll give you a trimmed down option and a more robust option. And then it'll be up to the board to decide which one they think is best as it relates to the use of funding.
Okay.
I can probably add a little bit of clarity. The higher figure that I had proposed included doing a communications plan at education only, not advocacy for sales tax. That's off now, right? And the 20,000 you have not spent yet?
I've not spent it for this year, and I do plan to ask for an additional 20 next year. I would spend the 20 on something in the left column until the left column was done, and then move on to individual campaigns. So yeah, I would continue to ask for the $20,000 line item and spend it towards branding and creative services until I hit that point. So additional funds would expedite that process, potentially make it a little bit more cohesive than having to piece it out. And then, if for some reason the 2 years of budget were to cover branding entirely, then any additional monies would be able to be used for marketing services is the number one thing that I think is gonna help us out the most in terms of communicating with the citizens, especially with the social media positioning. But also there could be an opportunity for public engagement, jobs like crisis communication, for instance. That can be something that if you do have an agency who you have a certain number of hours with, for projects, let's say you contract them for 100 hours of branding and they do 80 and their project's done, then you could potentially use those 20 hours for a crisis communication plan, some kind of a citizen engagement event. So just having additional money for those things, those would be continuing buys. The branding, once that's taken care of, there would be an upkeep fund for that, but it would be more of a one-time expenditure over the life of the brand.
Okay, thank you.
I had put, speaking from a professional standpoint, taking number one off the list, which was sales tax. My order of go on this was Citrus County Communications Audit, Brand Development and Brand Guide. Second was Citrus County Sub-Brands Communication Audits, Brand Development and Brand Guide as needed or appropriate per brand. We could probably just cut that entirely and just do the main brand for now. And feel free to disagree with me on that if you like. Then go to creative campaign for ads, billboards, et cetera, along the lines of FDOH. So in my world, what I would do if I'm asked to work with an in-house agency, which would be this situation, we would do some really high-level creative with some, like one ad campaign that, as we say, has legs It sort of sets the voice and the personality for the communications, and then we hand that to the in-house team, especially a talented one. I don't typically get to work with talented in-house teams, but we certainly have it with this one, and let them run with it. And then they can produce different iterations, they can write new lines, new designs and stuff that fit within that family. And then I had mentioned that infographics for half dozen of our thorniest message topics: road resurfacing, stormwater, septic to sewer. We have those thorny topics that an infographic, back to the 6-second attention span and too long didn't read, infographics are a really great way to look at something as a snapshot. So those would be my order of go, and depending on what we do in the budget process, we can get all the way through that list or not at all through that list. I would say that it's certainly at the very low end of what range I put forward, which I can't remember. And then the 20,000 could be applied to that as well. So I'm kind of thinking maybe 60 for the next year's budget, and then 20 this year should get us where we need to go, and it wouldn't be there the following year.
Correct. Any item in this line would be amended once the branding is completed for just moving forward with marketing and public relations projects, one-off projects.
That's
And
my
then-
spidey sense anyway on where we would end up.
Yeah.
So-
However long it takes me to chip away at branding, whether it be 20,000 a year or, all at once, and then move on to something else. Any additional funds once branding was completed would be those other two campaign projects for this part of what we do in communications. Obviously, that AV line is another large dollar line, and it could get larger or it could get smaller once we determine a project schedule. It's something I'm working on with Charles. He's done a great job of installing all the things we already had. And now we're starting to talk about additional audiovisual projects that we can work on within that line item. But just always moving forward. And I would like to just say also that in terms of adding staff, that's certainly not something I'll be putting in this budget year's request, although in the future, I think having someone who specifically focuses on, let's say, graphic design could be someone who would be a really good addition to the team. We obviously have a media and content manager. We've got an audiovisual wizard, and I do a little bit of everything, but I would say that graphic creativity is not my strongest suit. I think that we could really go far with someone who has that capability, and then obviously we are all cross-trained within these buckets. So just having one more staff member to cover a spot could be beneficial to us in the future. And my thought process is if we were to take that money, let's say we were to take, $60,000 and put it towards a agency or a campaigning system that you just get one project with and you're done. You could kind of do what we did with Charles, which is end a contract with a third party and then hire someone for the amount of that contract and allow them to, give the county 40 hours of good work and create a job within Citrus County. I just feel like that's the better use of the money if those are the only two options. Obviously, there's a third option which is zero.
I
Okay.
completely agree with that, and functionally, the outside firm would produce a lot of the graphics you need for year one anyway.
Yes.
So then it becomes a ongoing thing, and I don't know where we are with, are we allowed to do contract labor for a smaller amount if we don't need a full-time graphics person?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to say, at the TDC, my big thing was measurement. So I know this is completely different, but how do we measure this? At the TDC, if we put 50,000 into something and we don't get any results, we don't fund it anymore. So if we put 20,000 into something, how are you measuring that we're getting our money's worth for what we're putting it into? When we start, because, I'm looking at the big scheme of things. We're going to have the sheriff come up, and he's going to be asking for a whole lot of money, and everybody else has all these projects they want, and the money's just not there. So what I'm trying to figure out is how do we demonstrate that, as you know very well, at the TDC, we would, the agencies were the ones coming up and saying, we're not getting response from this, we need to move it and do this and do that. What's your thinking on this? How are we going to be able to, a year or 2 years from now, stand up and tell the citizens that this was money well spent? What is the measurement?
Well, I think that the branding is an investment in almost like a digital infrastructure. So I kind of think seeing the money was well spent is seeing a very well done logo and branding kit that can be used, and then watching that kit be used well over the period of our investment. But in terms of campaigns like social media positioning, obviously billboard campaigns you really can't track, but any kind of online advertising that might be done, print publications, anything on our website, anything on social media, there's metrics that go with that, right? So I can count those metrics and see, I think some things I would look at right away. You mentioned the website, which Miles has done a fantastic job of cleaning up. So some of the things that you saw may already be gone because he's been going in there with a fine-tooth comb. So that, is a function of not having a web manager for a few months. But it is definitely being paid attention to now. We can go in there and put that information on the website and really make sure that people are clicking. The click-through rates is, do people click through your advertisement to your page? But then once someone's on your page, the bounce rate is how long it takes for them to get out of there. So the more pages someone hits on a website, that statistic will improve. But you also want to make sure that people get to a page and get to where they need to be. So if you're seeing people click through 1, 2, 3 pages, and then on the third page bouncing, they're probably getting tired of being on your page and not getting the answer they're looking for. So we're really constantly trying to clean that up and get that out there to improve the messaging. But it's the same with social media. If something's not working, we can change that up, we can move it around, and so not only can we measure it, but we can also change our approach based on those strategies.
Okay, great. Anybody else have anything?
No, sir.
Anything? Randy, anything else for us?
No, sir.
Veronica, great job.
Thanks.
Miles, always great seeing your smiling face out there. So,
And thank you to Charles for being in the
yeah,
room.
thank you, Charles. Appreciate having the right thing on the screen at the right time. That's
Yes.
a nice thing to have too. So, okay, well, if we have no other business at this workshop, we'll be back here at 1 o'clock for our regular scheduled meeting, and the workshop's adjourned.